What's up everybody, Cayna here on the Method YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be discussing the topic of the heroic week being cut out. So before we start talking about that, I first want to talk a little bit about what normally happens. So let's take Sanctum as a prime example. In Sanctum, we would get the patch released first, or Corvia released, and we would then spend about 1 or 2 weeks farming Corvia. This is generally a quite chill week. You kind of just get to see the balance changes, you get to see some patch changes, you get to play a little bit of the new content. Since everyone's kind of doing it at the same time, we're all just like spending a lot of time together, having a good time and really just getting the team bonding going and preparing for what's going to happen. Then normally we would have a heroic week. All of our split runs generally happen there, we fully optimize them, and the nice thing about this is that people kind of just get, all of the they get all of their tier pieces, they get all of their trinkets, hopefully, and we really just try to make sure that people do it and get all of the best gear. We will then go do a bunch of M+, we will then go do a bunch of PvP, maybe a practice raid here and there, test some weak auras, test some functionality things, and then on the big day, Mythic releases and we go into Mythic. We start killing all the Mythic bosses, we generally blast through the first 2 and then have a very limited amount of wipes on the next 2, 3. And then we generally get to like the first wall, you maybe run like 1 or 2 heroic splits there. You get to the next few bosses until you get to like the last 2 bosses where you then start knocking out all of your splits. Now, what happened this time is that they fully cut out the heroic week. So we didn't have an extra week of gear, we didn't have the extra fold, we didn't get to do the instance, we didn't get to test our weak auras, all of these things. But I think the most important thing of this is that we didn't get to go into Mythic straight away. Lately what has happened, at least in the last 2 races, is go into heroic first. In this particular case, we and us and Liquid even went into normal first. And I think it's really sad because I think it's a really big hype destroyer. The raid releases and people want to see us kill the Mythic bosses and the Mythic versions and push on the Mythic type of things. But instead we're actually sitting there just killing content that's generally considered easier for us. And even for the players, it's a really big demoralizing because instead of having all the hype of, yeah, let's go guys, it is, let's do the most boring stuff instantly. What's my opinion on this? I think it's generally quite bad. I don't like it. From a viewer perspective, I really dislike that the hype gets destroyed. I really dislike that we're not seeing us, the top guilds going to Mythic and tackling the content as hard as possible, getting all of these nice little views, the first few kills, and I really dislike that type of stuff. I think the hype is super important from a viewer perspective, and as from a player perspective, I think it's really important that we just get to go in there and clip out those bosses and, get those early standings going and maybe show some interesting comps. I think that's generally kind of important. And I think it's way more exciting for the players, the watchers, and for the casters. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel about it. From a pure player perspective, I also think it's really bad. So, tier pieces are obviously very powerful, and just having 1 week extra of not getting the tier pieces kinda sucks. Sometimes you just have people that just got unlucky. We had some people that did not have 4-piece. We had a Elemental Shaman that did not have it, we had a Shadow Priest that did not have it, we had 2 of our healers did not get 4-piece, which was really sad. Right, you're just missing a lot of extra throughput just due to RNG, which almost kinda sucks, because for some people it just means replacement. We prepared 3 rogues for this tier, and one of the rogues just didn't get 4-piece. He prepared all of these months to just not loot, luckily, and yeah, there you go, now you're benched. It really sucks for that type of stuff as well. The other thing that I really dislike about it is the pure fact that the amount of splits that we have to do is just too powerful. Or the amount of gearing that we have to do, rather, is too powerful. We have to start with like 8 splits of normal, and we have to then go straight into 8 splits on heroic. And maybe for some bosses we even will do like 15 splits. Like if you had Brute Keeper, for example, or Brute Mother rather, we were doing like 10 to 15 of those in the first week, just because of the power of the trinkets. And I think those type of things are really unfun. The other caveat to this is also Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus also was lucrative because Mythic Plus would drop heroic item level gear. So because of the power that is there, and because we're not fully decked out on heroic, we're going to need the gear somewhere. And especially with the current way of how crafting works in the game, we would spend so much time into Mythic Plus. This particular race, in the race of the Fall of the Incarnates, we spent more time in M+ than I think in the last 2-3 tiers combined. Because we literally would sit there for a full day just spamming 16 to 20 keys to get the upgrade tokens and to get all of the highest item level gear, which normally we would be able to do in a heroic week. So it's just, again, more time taken away from guilds progressing Mythic, doing the cool bosses and showing all of these cool techs into doing stuff that nobody likes to watch, which is splits and Mythic Plus. Maybe some people enjoy the Mythic Plus content, but generally, I think if you have to see either people progress a new boss in Mythic or doing Mythic Plus content, you probably want to watch the Mythic Raid content, I would assume. Now, is there any positives? There's a couple. Heroic Week, hysterically, is kind of boring and it's obnoxious. Basically, in Heroic Week, right, we will farm out the vault of, the weekly vault that you get, and this includes things like Mythic Plus PvP. It's not fun. We want to just raid and we want to just do our Mythic raids. But generally, it's going to have to happen, so if I have to choose between the two, I would rather do it in the Heroic Week than have to do it in the Mythic Week. However, not having to do PvP is really, really nice. And I would love to find a way to maybe force players to not have to do as much different content. I don't think M+ people particularly always like to raid or to do PvP. I don't think PvPers like to have to do sometimes Mythic Plus or raids. And I would love to see if we can find a better system that allows people to just do one thing, so our raiders can just raid during the Heroic Week, or the M+ people can just do M+ during the Heroic Weeks, and the PvP people can just do PvP during their season starts, instead of feeling like they have to go into raids as well to try and get their tier pieces. What about the casual player? Does it impact their gameplay at all? Now, for the full casuals, I don't think it impacts you much. If you just do normal, and you just raid Heroic, I don't think it impacts you much. For a step back from us, so maybe top 50 guilds, I've heard mixed reviews. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But generally, I've heard the review that a lot of them felt too pressured. A lot of them felt like, if I do not spam Mythic Plus, I am going to be behind the curve. And I think this actually happens in a little bit lower edge guilds as well. So the best example I have of this is Steve likes raiding. Steve has a job, he has a wife, he doesn't have too much time. So Steve will show up in the raid, maybe he's done 1 or 2 Mythic dungeons, and he will show up at 380 item levels in the Fall of the Incarnates. Which 380 to 385 item level to start the raid with on the first week was a good item level. However, Steve raids with Thomas. And Thomas, he does not have a job, he does not have a wife, and all that Thomas does is spam keys. Thomas showed up with 405 item level. He has 2 pieces of gear, Mythic crafted, he has 405 item level in every single slot, he has 25 Raider IO already, or 2500 Raider IO score. And now they go into the raid. Now, Steve already does not like that he's getting out DPS'd ridiculous by Thomas, who's 25 item levels higher than him. But now they kill the boss and loot drops. And it's their best in slot ring. Steve has very low rings, and Thomas has really big rings. So as a guild, you would now want to reward, or you would want to give the ring to the person that has the lowest item level. But the other person spent way more time in game to make this kill happen. So what do you do now as a guild? Do you give it to the person that gets the biggest upgrade, or do you give it to the person that deserves it the most in reality? I've heard a lot of things of this from different guilds in different world ranks, where it's now really, really hard to reward people that play the game a lot for you, versus the people that play the game a lot less. Heroic Week tends to cut this issue away a little bit more. It can still be there, but it helps lesser the issue. What would be the overall best case scenario for this? I've heard a lot of suggestions, and I know people like Max and Scribe have been very active on this topic as well. And I would say, I think Scribe and Max generally like the idea of there not being a Heroic Week. But the most optional scenario would be that Heroic Week comes back, but the vault gets changed. No one during Heroic Week wants to be forced to completely juice out a 9 out of 9 vault for the best possible things. PvE players generally don't want a PvP, and PvP players generally don't want a PvP. There being a little bit of overlap between M+ and raiding is kind of fine, but maybe not to the extent that there is this time, which is tier pieces only drop from raids and other people have to wait for either faults and get lucky, or wait 8 weeks for the catalyst to come up. I think my preferred way would be catalyst comes up after 1-2 weeks of release, and the faults are capped to one particular content. So this way M+ people can fill out their vault with M+, PvP people can fill out their vault with PvP, and raiders can fill out their vault with raids. It would be quite a drastic change, and I don't really expect it to happen, but I do know that Blizzard is a lot more open to feedback, or Blizzard is the most open to feedback than they have ever been. So, with all that said and do, what's the conclusion of all of this? For me, the conclusion is, I like that Blizzard is trying stuff. They have been communicative, they have been active with a lot of different changes, and it really feels like Blizzard is heavily trying to better the game. I would love for them to try to not be too scared to do ideas like this, to take in the heavy feedback that is being provided, and to improve on the systems that they're putting in, rather than sometimes just kind of trying to scrap a system, oh, this didn't really work out, and having to pull a ripcord. As we have previously seen with, like, Covenants, they tried their thing, they tried to improve on it, but in the end they had to pull a ripcord, because it just wasn't it. Personally, if it doesn't get changed, I would like Heroic Week back, but I'm also very curious to hear what everyone else has to say on the topic. What do you think? Did you like the Heroic Week? Do you want Heroic Week back? Did you like that Mythic and Heroic release at the same time? How did you enjoy the race? Did you like that we're doing a lot more splits and not raiding Mythic from the start? Do you like seeing us join the raid on normal and Heroic first instead of going straight into Mythic? How do you think these changes affected your perception of the race and your fun watching the race? And even, how did you feel it yourself? If you raid competitively or you try and raid at all, how did this feel to you? So please do make sure you leave a comment below, and I will be very excited to reach all of them and to see what everyone else has to say. Again, this has been Cayna. Thank you very much for watching the video, and have a great day.